In recent decades, the Chinese military has undergone a dramatic transformation. In addition to fielding the largest standing army in the world, it's now regarded as the third most powerful military in the world, with an ever-expanding smorgasbord of advanced weaponry at its disposal. But all of that might be hiding a weakness that China doesn't want you to know about. Lessons learned during the war in Ukraine, combined with some historical context, give indications that Chinese military power might be far less substantial than it seems. Let's investigate why the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, might be more of an origami dragon than a genuine military power. To be sure, on the face of it, the PLA is on quite a roll. At the expensive military parade on September 3, 2025, to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, the PLA showcased its latest advancements in military technology, strategic deterrence, and combat systems. For the first time, China revealed its complete nuclear triad, including the DF series, DF-5C, DF-61, and DF-31BJ intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBM, with a range exceeding 12,400 miles and 10 independently targetable re-entry vehicle warheads. Alongside them, the JL-3 submarine-launched ballistic missile, the newly unveiled JL-1 air-launched nuclear missile, and new road-mobile DF-61 ICBM trundled down Chang'an Avenue on Tiananmen Square in Beijing. The parade also featured 4 new hypersonic anti-ship missiles, YJ-15, YJ-17, YJ-19, and YJ-20, equipped with hypersonic glide vehicles and advanced maneuverability, and designed for precision strikes against high-value targets like aircraft carriers. The LY-1 laser weapon, mounted on an HZ-155 armored truck, was also unveiled alongside high-energy laser and high-power microwave systems, showcasing China's multi-layered anti-drone and anti-missile defense network. In the skies above the parade, 5 models of 5th-generation stealth fighters, J-20, J-20A, J-20S, J-35A, and the PLA Navy's J-35 flew in formation for the first time. Large torpedo-shaped unmanned underwater vehicles such as the AJX-002, which has the potential to revolutionize undersea warfare if deployed at scale, were also showcased. On land, the Type 100 4th-generation main battle tank was unveiled, featuring an unmanned turret, active protection systems, augmented reality technology, and advanced radar. All in all, the display of military prowess looked, as President Donald Trump put it, very, very impressive. There's just one problem. How do we know that all this hardware actually does what it says on the box? After all militaries and weapons manufacturers have plenty of incentive to talk up the potency of their weaponry, particularly when it comes to the manufacturers. It's marketing strategy 101 to talk up your product's strong points and talk down or ignore completely any flaws. But talking up weapons capabilities also acts as a form of deterrence. The nastier, more destructive your enemies think your weapons are, the less likely they are to provoke or attack you. We've seen Russia play this game in Ukraine. A single demonstration of the Oreshnik missile system, whose impact and aftermath are somewhat shrouded in the fog of war, was followed by much crowing from the Kremlin about its potential to inflict damage akin to a nuclear strike, but without the ensuing radiation fallout. Later, it was announced that the system had entered serial production and was being deployed both in Russia and Belarus. There's no conclusive evidence that the Oreshnik does what Russia says it does, or that the system has in fact entered serial production and been deployed. But what the information does is give Ukraine's Western backers serious pause to reconsider their support for Ukraine, particularly about supplying more powerful weapons that could be used to strike large targets more effectively deep inside Russia. The subsequent testing of the nuclear-powered, nuclear-capable Burevestnik ballistic missile and Poseidon stealth underwater drone torpedo both have the same goal. If these weapons do what Russia says they do, they would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the world. The Poseidon could be positioned in a strategic location, for example, just offshore of San Francisco, and then detonated without warning, causing a massive radioactive tsunami that covers the entire Bay Area. The Burevestnik could stay in the air indefinitely, out of range of air defense systems, and then swoop down to hit any target anywhere on the planet at blistering hypersonic speed within minutes. The message in playing up these weapons is clear: don't mess with us or you'll regret it. But what if they're bluffing? It certainly wouldn't be the first time that Russia was caught bluffing about the power of its supposed super weapons. In fact, during the 1950s and 60s, bluffing about weapon strength and even inventing super weapons out of thin air was a standard Soviet tactic. Like China, the Soviets had a penchant for grandiose military parades to showcase their supposed military might, as does the Soviet Union's current reincarnation, the Russian Federation. At a massive parade in 1965 to mark the 20th anniversary, enormous GR-1 missiles, so-called global missiles that could reach anywhere on the planet, were somberly drawn across Red Square by tractors. Soviet radio commentators read from their pre-prepared speech. The parade of considerable military might is concluded with gigantic defense missiles. Their maintenance is entirely automated. There are no limits to what these missiles can do. The massive missiles made international headlines, causing much concern among Western military analysts and the general public alike. However, the whole display was a fake. They weren't real missiles at all, just replicas of a weapon that in reality didn't exist. The secret was revealed in the memoirs of Vladimir Semychastny, a KGB chairman and one of the organizers of Nikita Khrushchev's removal from power. Moreover, it was far from an isolated incident. Regularly, about once, twice or three times a year, we officially claimed to have mastered some new missile technology. Following those announcements, we'd present them on the Red Square during parades. Only a very small circle of people was aware that a number of these new missiles were simply fakes, a bit like a Potemkin village, and that they absolutely have no ability to fly, he confessed. So why did the Soviets resort to such elaborate deception? According to Semychastny, given the limited surveillance technology of the day, it wasn't easy for Western intelligence services to gauge the Soviet military's potential, because it was a closely guarded secret. All of the most powerful weapons were kept in underground hangars, so the only way to observe them firsthand was at the Soviet Union's regular military parades. The Soviets knew that their rivals couldn't verify if the weapons worked as claimed, so they deliberately deceived them. Then Soviet leader Khrushchev had actually started talking up the GR-1, which had no US analog at the time, 3 years earlier. Possessing a global missile made every other deterrent obsolete. Global missiles could not be detected in time to take any preventive measures, he had said of the GR-1, as though it was a done deal. In reality, at the time of the speech, the Construction Bureau hadn't even prepared a research proposal, let alone started production, so the missile's capabilities were, at best, pure speculation. Still, the scheme worked. NATO intelligence started searching for information about the GR-1 in earnest, giving it the codename SSX-10 Scrag. When the prototype was rolled out onto the Red Square in 1965, there were no doubts left in their minds. The Soviets had done it. The deception didn't end there. After a parade, the replica would be taken to one of Moscow's train stations, in full knowledge that foreign embassy staff would be watching to try and assess which direction the new weapon would be headed. As Semychastny recalled, listening in on phone conversations between military attachés and finding out about any planned work trips in pursuit of the missile, we were able to determine how successful our plan had been. In this way, foreign agents let us know what worked and what didn't. But the GR-1, which was eventually scrapped before reaching production after a series of failures in testing, was far from the only weapon the Soviets blatantly lied about. A very similar deception was implemented with respect to the fearsome-looking 59-foot self-propelled RT-15 and RT-20 missiles. They looked great on parade, but failed during tests and were never included in the Soviet arsenal. It was the same story with the Soviets' gigantic tracked 2B1 heavy artillery, the Oka. Technically, it was capable of launching a projectile 30 miles away, but the recoil was so strong that it disabled the engine and transmission, and the tracks had to be swapped out for new ones roughly every 12 miles due to the oversized mortar's sheer weight. 6 Okas were poignantly paraded on Red Square in 1961, before being quietly scrapped a few months later. During the 1954 parade, the M4 bomber was presented to the world, allegedly capable of lifting off from ice in the Chukotka region, right next to the US, while carrying a nuclear payload. In reality, after suffering numerous setbacks, the plane was discreetly repurposed as a refueler. With these tactics baked into the national military DNA for decades, it would be naive to assume that Russia isn't up to similar tricks today with the Oreshnik, Burevestnik and Poseidon, at least to an extent. The rationale for doing so would be identical to the Soviet deceptions, i.e., to force NATO to think twice about escalation in Ukraine. Moreover, the question remains as to whether China might be engaged in the same kind of ocular wall pulling. To be sure, with the US's ubiquitous and all-pervasive satellite and other surveillance networks constantly mapping China's military movements, added to its expertise at cyber operations, it's infinitely more difficult for China or Russia to hide military developments than it was in the 1960s. Even without the PLA releasing footage and reports on its various weapons tests and rollout of new weapons, the US can observe what China is doing pretty much in real time. But the fact remains that, unlike the US, whose advanced weapon systems have mostly all been tried and tested in combat, precious few of China's supposed superweapons have any actual combat experience whatsoever. China's last major conflict was the Vietnam War, with the last skirmishes in the aftermath of that war's conclusion finally fizzling out in 1979. That means no one, including the Chinese and the US, has any idea how all these missiles, drones, tanks, stealth jets, laser weapons, and what have you will fare on real-life battlefields. So, from the perspective of deterrence, it would certainly be in China's interest to make the US think that its weapons are a lot more potent than they actually are. It could well be that the Chinese, like the Soviets before them, are bluffing, rolling impressive-looking weapons out at majestic parades, which on closer inspection turn out to be more or less made of balsa wood, like so many high-rise apartment blocks in their famed empty cities. However, there's another compelling reason underscoring how China's military might be nowhere near as capable as the PLA would have us believe: endemic, deeply ingrained corruption. And again, it's the war in Ukraine that provides the grounds for suspicion. There can be little doubt that military corruption has severely hampered the military efforts of both Russia and Ukraine. As a headline from the Global Security website phrased it, Ukraine's reputation for corruption is legion, with the nation ranked as the joint third most corrupt nation in Europe on Transparency International's most recent Corruption Perceptions Index, level with Serbia and ahead of Belarus and Bosnia-Herzegovina. Still, with a ranking of 35, Ukraine still scores 60% higher than Russia, whose score of 22 puts it on par with Lebanon and just a point higher than Zimbabwe. Ever since it launched its invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Russia has been riddled with widespread corruption issues that have exposed systemic issues within its leadership and procurement systems and threatened to derail its campaign entirely. In fact, the situation became so out of control that President Vladimir Putin was compelled to implement a major purge of high-ranking officials in the Russian Ministry of Defense in 2024, which is still ongoing. First to be busted, in April 2024, was Deputy Defense Minister Timur Ivanov, accused of taking bribes and living a lavish lifestyle funded by corrupt dealings. Lieutenant General Yuri Kuznetsov, head of the Defense Ministry's Personnel Department, was next to be detained for allegedly trading in state-secret clearances. Later in May, Major General Ivan Popov, former commander of the 58th Army, was arrested in a large-scale fraud case. Also in May, Lieutenant General Vadim Shamarin, Deputy Chief of the General Staff and head of the Main Communications Directorate, was arrested on charges of accepting bribes worth at least $400,000 in exchange for awarding state contracts to a communications equipment manufacturer. Vladimir Verteletsky, a senior official in the Defense Procurement Department, was also arrested in May and charged with abuse of authority for approving incomplete work under a state defense order, causing a loss of over $773,000. Army General Dmitry Bulgakov, former Deputy Minister of Defense, was accused of supplying low-quality military rations to troops, and Andrei Belkov, head of the military construction company, was detained in July 2024 over alleged abuse of defense orders. The arrests continue to this day, but it's unclear how much of an impact they're making. Estimates of embezzlement within the ministry range as high as $121 billion, highlighting the scale of the problem. Ukraine has also been the subject of high-profile corruption cases, especially in 2025. Since January, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, NABU for short, has been investigating Defense Minister Rustem Umerov for potential abuse of power. The probe stems from Umerov's decision to override a supervisory board vote that unanimously extended the contract of Defense Procurement Agency head Marina Bezrukova, whom he replaced with ally Arsen Zumadilov, and his dismissal of 2 board members who aren't allies. Then, in July 2025, a wave of anti-corruption protests gripped Ukraine following the Verkhovna Rada, Ukraine's parliament, passing bill number 12414, which stripped NABU and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, or SAPO, of their independence and granted expanded powers to the Prosecutor General, Ruslan Kravchenko, a known loyalist of President Zelensky. Protests erupted the same day in Kyiv, Odessa, Lviv, Dnipro, and other cities, marking the first major anti-government demonstration since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. Despite the widespread public outcry, Zelensky signed the controversial bill into law, defending it as necessary to remove Russian influences from anti-corruption bodies. However, in response to the protests, and perhaps more tellingly, harsh criticism from the likes of EU Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos, the Rada adopted a new bill, Bill number 13533, effectively reversing the changes. Subsequently, arguably the largest corruption investigation since the start of the war has been instigated by NABU. The case centers on Firepoint, a Ukrainian defense company that manufactures drones and the Flamingo cruise missile, along with Timur Mindich, a prominent businessman and co-owner of Zelensky's Vartel 95 entertainment studio. The probe, launched in August 2025, is investigating whether Firepoint inflated costs and misreported the number of drones delivered under government contracts, potentially receiving preferential treatment despite concerns about Ukrainian drones' performance against Russian air defenses. Firepoint has become one of the largest recipients of Ukrainian Defense Ministry funding for drone production, securing approximately one-third of the $1.04 billion spent on drones in 2024. The investigation, based on over 1,000 hours of surveillance, uncovered a kickback scheme involving 10 to 15% payments from contractors referred to as Schlagbaum. Former drone unit commander Major Yuri Kasyanov has also argued that Firepoint won contracts despite design flaws, while other models made by less well-connected companies such as Spear Drone were overlooked. In both Russia's and Ukraine's cases, corruption in the military can degrade its performance to the point that it can't function properly. The siphoned off money means that projects run way over budget or don't get completed at all. Weapons that have been procured don't arrive because payments for them have been pocketed. Cheap parts are substituted for effective ones, meaning weapons don't work properly on the battlefield, and the list goes on. China, for its part, has a corruption perception index score of 39, implying that it's significantly less corrupt than Ukraine and almost 4 times less corrupt than Russia in general. However, when it comes to the military, corruption in China is arguably more deeply entrenched than Ukraine and Russia put together. Indeed, so out of control is the problem that Chinese President Xi Jinping has been on a corruption purge that makes Putin's look tame. In September 2025, the PLA's rocket force announced the termination of nearly 200 partnerships with suppliers and bid evaluation experts, following a corruption investigation spanning 9 years. The corruption includes collusive bidding, submitting false materials, bias scoring, and forging credentials. The investigation follows a broader campaign initiated after the 2024 dismissal of former Defense Minister General Li Shangfu and the removal of 2 rocket force commanders. Li and former Defense Minister Wei Fenghe have been formally accused of taking bribes and undermining weapons production through corruption. But they're far from alone. Indeed, since 2024, numerous senior military officials have been arrested as part of a comprehensive anti-corruption drive. The Central Commission on Discipline Inspection extended its crackdown beyond the upper echelons of the PLA's uniformed branches to even include members of China's Central Military Commission, or CMC, the highest military command organization in the country. In November 2024, the arrest of Xi's long-term loyalist and CMC member, Admiral Miao Hua, sent shockwaves through the entire PLA leadership. Over the past 2 years, Multiple other defense industry officials have also been prosecuted for corruption, illegal outsourcing, and the use of defective, low-quality components. Hu Wenming, the chief architect of China's prestigious aircraft carrier program, was arrested for bribery, violating party discipline, and engaging in superstitious practices. Similarly, Liu Shiquan, head of North China Industry Corporation, was detained alongside Wu Yangsheng and Wang Changqing, the respective leaders of CASC and CASIC, China's largest missile manufacturers. Allegations have also surfaced around the misuse of $16 billion in research and development funds for fighter jet engines, leading to the well-documented subpar engine performance of China's fighter jets. But the crackdown may do little good. Many analysts feel that the rot is so deep that China's military has been terminally weakened from within, meaning that it's doubtful whether many of their so-called superweapons are capable of delivering what they've been hyped up to do. One of the primary sources of corruption in the PLA comes from its promotion system, where political and ideological reliability often outweighs merit and technological expertise. There are no clear, measurable benchmarks to assess a candidate's political and ideological trustworthiness, making the process extremely discretionary, which forges a patronage network where senior officers oversee a cohort of junior officers beholden to them. It's the kind of deep-rooted corrupt culture that's practically impossible to uproot entirely, not with tens of billions of dollars in military procurement funds floating around within easy grasp. And this kind of entrenched corruption, combined with endemic organizational chaos and limited expertise in operating high-tech equipment, continues to undermine confidence in the PLA's combat capability. Some analysts, like the Observer Research Foundation, observe that Xi's reluctance to pull the trigger and invade Taiwan, or indeed express China's supposed military might more forcefully in the region in general, is directly due to his concerns that his superweapons might well turn out to be expensive flops on the battlefield. If that's the case, then like the Soviets, a deeply corrupt PLA would be inclined to flaunt its military assets to project an illusion of strength and capability, despite the fact that they could collapse in a real battle. Now, it's tempting to put all of this together and conclude that China's military is a paper tiger or an origami dragon. However, that may not be too wise. Overestimating your enemy can be a costly error, leading to an overly cautious approach and the conflict being unnecessarily dragged out, a mistake some feel that the West has made in Ukraine. However, underestimating your enemy is likely not to be just costly but fatal. Napoleon Bonaparte and Adolf Hitler both made the mistake of poo-pooing away the Russian threat and ended up with Russian armies marching through Paris and Berlin respectively. China has ably demonstrated that it's more than capable of world-class engineering feats in bridge building, high-speed rail, nanotechnology, robotics, and beyond, despite rampant corruption across those industries as well. It would be hubris personified to assume that none of that expertise has been translated to its military tech, at least until its advanced weaponry has proven itself to be useless or not on the battlefield. We'll of course keep you updated as fresh information comes to light, so hit that subscribe button and enable notifications to ensure that you don't miss out. Thanks for watching.